is officially starting time. We've all read poorly written instructions and procedures. We've all read long, boring HR policy reports. And we've all received poorly written emails from our colleagues and employees and have skimmed through countless emails that drag on and on and on. So to get our technical writing focus off to an enthusiastic start, at the risk of this turning into, I don't know, just a little bit of a venting session, let's kick things off with some of our workplace technical writing challenges. And here's what a lot of this boils down to. As technical writers in the workplace, for the most part, we are being ignored. And no one likes being ignored, especially people in HR roles, those of you who are at the supervisory level, those of us who make our living as technical writers and editors. But the truth is, no one is really reading our documentation because people, for the most part, don't read anymore. They skim. It's true. We're writing these updates and directives, and we're attaching minutes and agendas for discussions at meetings to our emails, and yet when everyone shows up, it is quickly evident that no one read the email. They received it, but they didn't read it. They didn't even open the attachment, and that's a problem and a huge time waste. So as a result of working on this webinar today, you will realize from this moment on, there are two types of technical documentation that you and I can accomplish on the job today. Two categories of technical communication that you and I can generate and send to our readers, our end users, our target audience, so to speak. Be it an audience of one person to whom we're just answering an email, or 10 people who may serve on an HR advisory committee, or 10,000 people to whom you're sending a health care update or a payroll policy. In other words, all of our reports, proposals, updates, training modules. I know some of you today are responsible for writing and crafting, educational communication, memos, presentations, corrective action reports, employee file material, and the many emails that we generate each day, even the PowerPoint some of us plan, will fall into one of these two categories. What it all boils down to is that work as a technical writer, there are only two reasons we ever put anything in writing. And so if you'll look with me at the slide on the screen, you'll see those two categories. We have action messages and information messages. With action documents, this is any communication, be it hard copy or electronic copy or web copy, where the reason you are taking the time to put it in writing is because you expect your readership to do something as a result of reading it, or to act in some way differently as a result of reading it. And if it is a well-written action communication, which is one of the reasons we're gathered at this webinar today, that action is clearly summarized up front in what we call a well-written do statement, clearly stating what the action is to be accomplished, what we expect our reader or readers to do. The good news for us with email, your subject line serves as a do statement. People should get an email from you, and without even opening, they should be able to tell if it's an action email or an information email based on the subject line. And we can do that these days very tactfully without saying, action required, exclamation point, exclamation point. So to make this personal for you, as we shift from discussing action to information, think about this week. This is being recorded on a Friday. Think about the writing you have been responsible for this week. What are some specific examples of action communication you have generated on the job? And as you're thinking about those, let's look at information. Because with information messaging, we're not putting it in writing because we expect our readers to do anything. We are putting it in writing so that they will know about something they perhaps did not know about before, or they will understand something. And again, if it is a well-written information message, be it electronic, hard copy, web copy, that main purpose is not buried somewhere in the third paragraph of the second page. It is stated up front in what we call a well-written lead sentence. And I know some of us have to harken back to high school when it comes to discussing lead sentences, but your lead sentence answers the 6 journalist questions about your topic. We know those as the 5 W's and the 1 H, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And of course, we don't try to cram all of that into one sentence, but our opening should answer the 5 W's and the 1 H, and everything that follows supports that lead sentence. Think about information messages you have crafted during this week. Now, people ask me all the time, Mandy, can't a message be both? Can it be both action and information? And the answer to that, of course, with technical communication, the answer is yes. But if it is both, how do we as technical writers treat it? We have to treat it as an action message because we may be providing a wealth of information, but we're doing it in hopes our readers will choose a wise course of action. And if we're not crystal clear on our purpose, our readers certainly won't be. And that's one reason people do give up reading our messages. Now, folks, as elementary as this slide may seem to you, this answering of one question, action or information, is the one secret to streamlining technical writing processes at work and even save time composing. Because clarity in purpose, clarity in our destination is the key to faster writing at work. And that all begins with clarity of purpose. And as we work today, I do hope you'll have a notepad or a pen or pencil ready and available for a few of our 10-second and 20-second drills. You'll have some instances during our time together where you'll jot down your answers and improvements to a few common technical writing maladies. You see, I believe even these webinars should be interactive. You don't want to just sit and listen passively for 60 minutes. You'll retain much more information by participating and by even jumping in and writing your answers during some of our writing drills. Some of you may have already printed this presentation out prior to our time together, and you can even write your answers in the margins. Now, it is true that you and I are writing on the job more than ever these days. According to the American Management Association, the average knowledge professional spends 11 work weeks a year reading and writing email. 11 weeks of our professional lives each year tied to email. And while this is not an e-writing focused webinar, do you ever get copied on email you just don't need? Because these same professionals believe that 58% of all the technical messages they receive are unnecessary and wasteful and copied to too many people who don't even need to see a copy of it. In that same survey, 76% believe that these written messages were too long and too wordy and not well written. Let that sink in. Too long, too wordy, not well written. And that is what we are going to work on today. We are not here to talk about better technical writing for the sake of better technical writing. We are here because I firmly stand by the quotation you see on the screen in front of you, that the quality of our writing directly reflects the quality of our work. I don't know about you, but I am so tired of sloppy writing these days, and it's abundant. There is no excuse for it. If we're sending out carelessly, hastily written emails and updates, if we don't bother to punctuate correctly, or if our writing has turned into a rash of run-on sentences with a few dots thrown in here or there, if we're typing in all caps, or worse, no caps at all. And if we begin to blur the line between texting and emailing, and I know you probably all know people who are beginning to take texting shortcuts in their professional writing. For instance, Vicki introduced us today. So if I said, I need for you to take this to Vicki, and I use the number 2 for the preposition to, and I spell U with just the letter U and the number 4 for 4, it makes us look bad. It makes our department look bad. It can make the organization as a whole look bad. The quality of our writing directly reflects the quality of our work. And we can't have a discussion about technical writing without mentioning the Plain Language Initiative. You see it on the screen. We refer to it as the PLI. I don't have this information about you. I don't know how many of you are full-time technical writers. If you are, in fact, if that is your educational background, you are more than likely already familiar with the Plain Language Initiative. In the United States, many state governments are adopting PLIs with the mandate of turning needlessly complex information into understandable communication. As a technical writer and editor, I see that as my job description every day. Leading the way in the PLI, however, is Florida. The governor of Florida, at the time this was adopted, about 15, 16 years ago, was adopted as an executive order for all state departments. Apparently, Floridians were complaining about gobbledygook and governmental ease creeping into some of the documentation. So the message of the governor is on this slide, and I'll paraphrase it for the sake of time, but the preamble to the PLI went this way. The way we communicate with the people we serve goes a long way toward fulfilling our responsibility to them. That responsibility ranges from routine procedures to issuing instructions that can save lives. Boy, does that describe so many of us. Our writing matters. It goes on to tell us that since it's impossible to speak personally with every citizen, it is vitally important that our methods of written communication be clear, concise, and free of needless verbiage. And then I highlighted this last sentence in green for you, because I believe this is the definition of technical writing. It tells us this executive order is specific by requiring clear language containing only necessary information presented in a logical sequence. The Plain Language Initiative. Here's an example from one of my clients in South Carolina. And again, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. But if you look at the paragraph on the screen, and I'm not going to read it out loud for you, you'll realize that's not really a paragraph, it's one sentence. And it's one sentence pulled from a longer chapter of a manual given to employees during their orientation with this facility. The Plain Language Initiative. And while this one is a bit of an extreme example, I have selected several aspects of the PLI to benefit your technical writing today. Think of this slide in front of you as our objectives slide. Vicki said I would lay out what we would cover today for you, and this is what we are going to roll up our sleeves and tackle. We're going to look at catching our skimmers. If we know most people skim today without reading in detail, we want to catch our skimmers. So here's some ways to go about doing this. We're going to look at our tendencies to use wasted words to enhance the readability. My favorite topic is the second bullet, using more bulleted list. Bullets rock. People read bullets, but there is a correct way and an incorrect way to format them according to technical writing guidelines. I'm excited about sharing those 5 guidelines with you. We're going to look at defining acronyms, technical terms, jargon, updating our language guidelines for better receptivity, and our final few minutes, we're going to look to make sure we proofread these messages so that they go out error-free. Let's look at the weeding out of wasted words. And I've listed some examples on the slide because the first indicator of better technical writing is that writers don't drag on and on and on. It's a huge complaint among readers. Time is money. So readers want technical updates that are concise, precise, and to the point. We do not need to use 50 words to explain something when 15 will do. And that's our focus under this gobbledygook. Gobbledygook is a real word. Many workplace writers have a tendency to be wordy. They muddle the point with too many words. So today's effective technical writer, and I would even go on to say technical editor, has a heightened awareness of how to write more concisely and clearly by eliminating unnecessary words and phrases. Let's tackle the technical writing bad habit of pretentious wording. And it's not so much fluff. With most of my clients, I don't run into fluffy writing. I run into a lot of filler. It's not fluff, it's filler. I don't see a lot of fluff in my clients' documents, but it's really this whole concept of filler or wasted words. Let's look on the screen. On the screen, you see some common filler phrases. And you'll also see the one-word solution. These are phrases that creep into writing without our even realizing it sometimes. And let's look at a couple of them on here. For instance, at this point in time, one-word response, now. In fact, I was teaching this class about, a few years ago to a client in North Carolina. And I had 38 chemical engineers in the room. And one of them said, yes, Ms. Stanley, and theoretically, there is no such thing as a point in time. It's a physical impossibility to have a point in time. And everyone in the audience thought about it and said, oh. And then the woman sitting next to him said, well, I respectfully disagree with that. There is a such thing as a point in time. It's called a photograph. A photo captures a point in time. And most of the people in the room went, oh, and they had a nice little debate in front of everyone. The key for us is 5 words versus 1 clear word. Same with the rest on this list. A great number of, many, for the purpose of, to do something. In order to is the one I am still guilty of after all these years. I have a tendency to say in order to this or in order to that, but when I see it, I know anytime I'm using in order to, I can replace it with simply to do this, to do that. So the key here is to be aware of our tendency to use wasted words and phrases. And it's not just phrases. It's words that creep into our technical communication. Look at this one, please. The one word we can purge from our vocabularies is utilize. In fact, most technical documents tell us never use 3 or 4 syllable words when a 1 or 2 syllable word can get the job accomplished for us. And this is nothing more than a fancy way of saying use. We should use. In fact, there's a name for this in writer circles, and people can have some fun with it, but it's called the rise of I's. It's how people tag I-Z-E onto the ends of words to create new, more professional sounding words, and some of them border on ridiculous. For instance, we talk about bulletizing information. I have a client in New Jersey, and they said, we are guilty of saying each month we're going to statementize our customers. That sounds painful. I had someone actually tell me the other day, let's calendarize this and get back. And I said, I know you did not just tell me to calendarize something. Or phrases such as this that creep in innocently enough into our writing. So if you're reading something this afternoon and you read a phrase during the month of May, as a technical editor, what could we say instead? In May. We all know May is a month. It's an example of submitting our documentation to the redundancy department of redundancy. But I think it goes back to how a lot of us learned to write in school. When we were in school, our teachers would say, your book report on Moby Dick is due this Friday, and don't forget it has to be at least 1,000 words. And we would do anything to stretch that writing out to 1,000 words. That's why we would use phrases such as during the crisp, cool, sunny month of May. It stretched it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But for technical communication, we have to unlearn that because we were almost taught to write wordy. The fewer words, many times, the clearer the communication when it comes to filler in our writing. Now, my favorite one is not on the screen, but my favorite one is when you hear people say, oh, look at those 2 twins. I think that's really 4 people. And then a client recently convicted me of one. He said, Because in my live seminars, I'll say, can you think of any others? And he said, yeah, it always cracks me up when I hear people say, oh, look, it's raining outside. And I thought, how many times have I said that? Because it's not raining inside. Of course it's raining outside. Redundancy, Department of Redundancy. So let's put this to work. Here's a sample sentence. Doesn't even look bad. By the way, Bob Stanley said that the week of July 23rd would be better for him with regards to a trip to Starkville. Again, simply by eliminating wasted words, let's see if we can improve this sentence by making it tighter, more to the point. I'm going to pull up my pencil tool. I have the blue ink here. What's something we already know we can eliminate? By the way, now I don't know why this writer decided to use it, but we can delete that. One of the most commonly used filler phrases is the word that. In many cases, you don't need the word that. Bob Stanley said that the week of July 23rd would be better for him. Again, I don't think that prepositional phrase. And instead of with regards to a trip to Starkville, why not say for a trip to Starkville? So if you look at the before and then here's the after on the screen, Bob Stanley said the week of July 23rd would be better for a trip to Starkville. We just eliminated 7 or 8 words, but have we changed the meaning of that sentence whatsoever? No, but we've cleared it up by getting rid of unnecessary words. So here is a 10-second drill for you. I'm going to be quiet for 10 seconds. Give you a chance to read the sentence on the screen. And not by doing a total rewrite, but simply getting rid of some of the phrases and consolidating the writing. See if you can improve this sentence to make it more readable. Because here's the truth. If people have to read something twice to fully understand it, they won't. You have 10 seconds. Look at it. Go. And I do have a bit of an answer key for you here. If you did something along these lines, you'll notice instead of saying to reflect additional, I use the action verb to add security guards and getting rid of all the if the intent is for this to be. That's one approach. You may have even come up with something better and more to the point. That's how we can eliminate the wasted words. This is one that a client in Florida sent me, and you really can't make these up. It sustained a sudden abortive impairment in its ability to fulfill its primary design functionality. If a sentence ever needed the plain language initiative, it is that one, because the plain language version of it, it broke. Just a little technical writing humor for you there, but an actual sentence in an actual technical manual. So we've looked at the getting rid of wasted words. Let's talk about how to handle acronyms and jargon. A reviewer complained that an HR policy had too many TLAs. TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. But in our line of work, we sometimes run into some FLAs, 4-letter acronyms, or LFLAs, long 4-letter acronyms, or some RLFLAs, really long 5-letter acronyms. And some organizations have acronyms for their acronyms. So how do we handle it? The Franklin Covey Style Guide for Business and Technical Communication is my go-to for technical editing. In fact, at the end of this presentation, at the end of the slide deck, I took a photo of that so that you can look into it for yourself. I do not sell that guide, but I recommend it. And so you'll see what it looks like at the very end. It's called the Franklin Covey Style Guide for Business and Technical Communication. There are so many style guides out there. This is the one that's geared for the writing that we do. And it teaches us the technical writing rule for handling acronyms. And I'm sharing it with you here because it may be just the flip of what you've heard before. But what the Technical Writing Style Guide tells us is that when you have or introduce a new or unfamiliar acronym, you use the acronym first and then in parentheses spell out the name or expression. The example is this. First, all punctuation marks have meanings. And what parentheses mean is that what's inside of them is of secondary importance. It's of secondary importance. So in the past, we've maybe spelled out a term and then put the acronym in parentheses. But because the acronym is what we're going to be using throughout that document, we don't want to bury it in parentheses. We want it to stand out to the reader, and we define it in parentheses. So here's an example of how that is used. Let's say my sentence is, have Vicki fill out the SJF and return it to Human Resources. Well, a lot of us don't know what SJF stands for. So the first time it is used, we do use SJF in the sentence, but in parentheses, we explain that SJF stands for Stock Justification Form. Now, anytime we use SJF in that document, we've defined it the first time and we can safely use it for there on out. If you're writing manuals that have chapters and different sections, I recommend each time you use it in a new section, you do use those parentheses to define them and spell it again, because if there's a chance someone could pick up that manual and just start with chapter 5 instead of chapter 1, you don't want them questioning what a certain acronym means. Of course, they will be spelled out on an acronym list in your glossary, but this makes it easy. And we want to make sure we're producing documents that are indeed reader-friendly. So, the guideline again is, if you introduce a new or unfamiliar acronym, use the acronym and then in parentheses, spell out the name or expression. Never assume people know what it means. Now, chances are you'll have someone in your office today approach you later this afternoon and say something along the lines of, so you spent an hour in that technical writing webinar today. Do you really think you're a better writer now? In fact, that is a decent question to ask. But I submit to you, if you practice this one next best practice alone, other people will notice a change in your communication style, and they will think you're a clearer writer because you've mastered how to get to the point. Your writing is clearer because you're using bulleted list effectively. Here is the example we are going to work with on our slide. This came from, I believe it was an instruction manual to teach people how to use an earlier version of PowerPoint. I'll share this one with you. And we're going to use this to highlight the 5 rules for bulleted list. Follow these instructions to select a background design in PowerPoint. Select the template option, double-click the OK button, highlight the name of your choice, and the Apply button should be clicked. Well, how many of you, when you heard me read that, noticed something didn't quite flow, especially between the 3rd and 4th bullet? Does anyone know what this stylistic writing discrepancy is called? This is an example of something we call faulty parallelism. Faulty parallelism. And it is our first technical writing must. Because when something is parallel, I think I ran out of room on the slide to write this, but if something is parallel, it means it has the same grammatical structure. In other words, if a bulleted list, 2 bullets or 22 bullets, all of the bullets must have the same grammatical structure, which means we can't mix complete sentences and phrases in the same list. They either all need to be written as sentences or all need to be written as phrases. We do not mix and match, nor do we mix and match the construction. Now this one has great, strong action verbs. Look at this. Select the template option. Double-click the OK button. Highlight the name of your choice. And then the last one is passive voice. The Apply button should be clicked. How do we rewrite that to make it parallel with the others? Well, we get rid of that passive construction and we would insert click the Apply button. Now it's parallel. We have select, double click, highlight, and click.
So our first goal as a technical writer is to have parallel language when we have list and bulleted list. But what about punctuation? Because how many of you see this, where I have select the template option, comma, double click the OK button, comma, semicolon, and over here we have this period. This is not correct in accordance with the most recent rules for punctuating bulleted list. The guideline that governs punctuating bulleted list now is open punctuation, which means you don't need a comma after each one. You don't need a semicolon. You don't need an and connecting the next to last or the last one. And you don't need a period at the end of the last one. In fact, the only punctuation mark you need is this colon up here. If a colon can walk up to you on the street and start talking to you, there's only one thing a colon's allowed to say. Colon say, look out, something's following me. A colon says, keep reading, a list follows. The mindset is, everyone, the bullet here takes the place of the punctuation mark there. So open punctuation. And you don't put a period at the end of the last one. Now, everyone, there is one exception to this rule. Sometimes in your document, your bullets are more than simple sentences or simple phrases. Sometimes you have 2 or 3 sentences for one bullet. And that's fine. And if that's the case, then you would put a period after each one. You would still have the colon up here, but then you would put a period at the end of each one for consistency and, again, parallel punctuation. So we've looked at parallelism. We've looked at punctuation. What about capitalization? Do you or don't you capitalize the first letter of the first word of each item in a bulleted list? And the answer is yes, you do, regardless. See, this is a bad example. This should be a capital S, capital D, capital H, capital C, and click. You do capitalize the first letter, the first word of each item in a bulleted list. Even if it's just a one-word list, even if it's not complete sentences, you still capitalize. Now, here's a good one for you. How do I know when to use numbers versus when to use bullet points? Because there is a rule that governs that. And the answer is only use numbers if the items are steps or must be performed in order. Again, this is a bad example. This should be, I'm going to change my pen color here. This should be 1, 2, 3, 4. Because those are steps. You can't do 2 until you've done 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. But you don't just arbitrarily number list. You need 5 pieces of equipment to engage in this task. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if the items are of equal importance, you use bullets. You use numbers if it must be performed in order or considered in order. So we've looked at 4 of our 5 guidelines so far. Let's look at this list now and see the after. This is the polished product. Open punctuation, parallel language, numbered because it's steps, the first letters are capitalized. That's the guideline for bullets in our technical documentation. And the 5th guideline is this one. Avoid stray bullets. How many bullets must you have? You must have 2, not just 1. In our line of work, we call those stray bullets, and we don't want any stray bullets in our technical documentation. So if you put together PowerPoint for your employees, there should never be a slide that just has 1 bullet on it like this one. If it is 1 bullet, you get rid of the bullet and you write it as a complete sentence. It's just like those outline rules. We learned you cannot have an A unless you have a B. You cannot have a 1 unless you have a 2. You can't have 1 bullet unless you at least have 1 other. This is, I don't know how you feel about it, but one of the most fun exercises we can do. This is a set of instructions from one of my clients' accounting software procedural manuals. And I use this as an exercise in every one of my live classes because, again, you can't make this up. You can see why people could not understand or make it all the way through these series of instructions. The problem they were having is this one report they would run had these random commas popping up in the different cells of this accounting report. And no one could figure out how to get rid of the commas. And so this is the instruction guide for getting rid of these commas. But this didn't help people very much because they would get lost or bogged down in the middle of it. So my exercise and my challenge for you is take that paragraph and using what we know about bulleted list, write this using bullets so that our user can follow through it and understand what to do. The reason this exercise works, though, is it introduces us to one more technical writing guideline. And that guideline is called the 1 equals 1 rule. 1 equals 1. This rule tells us that one bullet equals one physical movement. One bullet equals one step. One bullet equals one decision. In other words, you don't put 2 or 3 action items in one bullet. Each of those should stand alone separately. One bullet equals one decision or one physical movement. The reason this 1 equals 1 rule is so important is at the end of this exercise, everyone who works on it today should end up with the same number of bullets. In my live seminars, I have everyone do a drum roll on the tables and shout out the number of bullets they came up with. But for you, rather than make you work it now, I'll give you a chance to work it later, and the answer key is the very last slide on our deck. I wonder if you'll come up with that magic number. Fun exercise. We also promised that we would look at breaking our large technical writing projects into the 3 technical writing phases. It doesn't take long to explain this, but it helps you have an organized mindset for approaching some of these. We do have 3 phases, everyone. We have our pre-writing phase, our writing phase, and our rewriting phase. And to help us break it down, our pre-writing phase is when we're doing all of our research and gathering all the information we need to draft this new policy or procedure or whatever it may be. Perhaps it's research. Perhaps we're interviewing some employees to get up-to-date information. This is when we map it out. This is when we organize it and outline it. This is our pre-writing phase. But to manage our time, most technical writing guides will say you don't want to spend any more than 20% of the time you've dedicated to your project, 20% to the pre-writing phase. In fact, if you think about the technical writing project as a large apple pie, the pre-writing slice of that pie would be 20% of the pie. The writing phase is, and you don't try to do both of those at the same time. I know a lot of people try to pre-write and write at the same time. You're not really ready to write until you have everything ready, or else you're spinning your wheels and you're wasting time. So your writing phase is when you have everything you need, you have it outlined, you have it organized, and you sit down and you are typing, you're drafting the message. And if you've taken the time to pre-write, then that first draft should be fairly well organized. Yes, you'll have to edit it some, but again, these same manuals agree that no more than 20% of our time is spent in the writing phase, which saves a full 60% of our time in the rewriting phase. 60%. That startles a lot of people. But what are we doing during the rewriting? It's during rewriting that we make it as perfect and precise as possible. The rewriting phase is when you're editing, proofreading, seeking input, having your peers review it. This is when you make sure every word is serving a purpose and every punctuation mark is in the correct place. It is in that rewriting phase that we polish and end up with an end product that we can all be proud of because it's reader friendly. Pre-writing, writing, rewriting. The reason these numbers are significant is that many times it's reversed. We end up spending 60% of our time in that pre-writing phase, maybe 20% in the writing, and then we end up rushing through the rewriting, or we're not saving or budgeting enough time at the end of that project for the rewriting. Set your calendar and work backward. What's your due date? And make sure we're saving enough time for that rewriting phase. I'll be happy to answer any questions about that as we begin to get to the end of our time together. In fact, one of our last promises is striving for innocuous language in HR documentation, or any technical writing documentation for that matter. And the first guideline for this is, ultimately, see if your writing passes the Sergeant Joe Friday test. Now, this one even dates back to before my time, but there was a show called Dragnet, and the main character was Sergeant Joe Friday. And at least once in every show, he would say, "Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts." Does our writing remove itself from any emotion or subjectiveness, and we're sticking with just the facts? You know the best way to know if it is? Give it to someone else and have them read that. Better if from an uninformed point of view, to see if it makes sense to them and it comes across as objectively written. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. Another guideline for us is gender-neutral language. I know organizations that in the past decade have had to conduct total rewrites of some of their policies and procedures because of masculine pronouns in all of their manuals. We do want to strive for gender-neutral language in any of our company documentation. We'll use this simple sentence as an example because there are 3 solutions to make it easy. An instructor must pass a difficult 5-year assessment program before he can become an AMA faculty member. So how can we get rid of this? Well, one solution is to pluralize it. In fact, I'll make a note here. One solution, pluralize. And you do that, you can't just change he to they, but you have to make sure your pronoun's antecedent is plural too. So in this case, we would say, instructors must pass a difficult 5-year assessment program before they can become AMA faculty members. Or eliminate the pronoun altogether. In this case, how can we get rid of he without altering the sentence? How about an instructor must pass a difficult 5-year assessment program before becoming an AMA faculty member? Or an instructor must pass a difficult 5-year assessment program to become an AMA faculty member. And if you can do that, that's probably the easiest way to get rid of that gender-specific language. And then one last one, and albeit this is my least favorite, and that is use the he/she. He/she. And yes, it is acceptable to use the s/he. Again, that tends to be a more awkward way of getting rid of gender-specific pronouns. I prefer either the pluralization or the elimination. But all 3 of those can get rid of gender-specific language in our documentation. And if you ever wanted to know, does this really matter? This is a real-life example from one of my clients 8 or 9 years ago. We were working on corrective actions and writing those in a manner that eliminated any kind of tone or prejudice. And there was this one situation of a female employee who skipped a corrective action report because the pronoun was he, and she did not think it applied to women in the workplace. Strange but true, and language makes a difference. Our last promise was a step-by-step process for technical editing and proofreading, because any document or email that goes out with your name or your organization's name and seal on it must be absolutely error-free with no embarrassing bloopers or mistakes. I use the STAR strategy. The S stands for spell check. A man was celebrating his 25th wedding anniversary with his precious wife, Carol, and he had a big surprise for her. On the day of their wedding anniversary, he had purchased a full-page ad to run on their neighborhood newspaper where he was going to publish a love letter to his precious wife of 25 years. So he worked with copy editors at the newspaper office to write the letter. He brought in photos of them through the 25 years of their marriage, starting with their wedding portrait from 25 years before and how they changed and grown as a family through those years. So it was a sweet, sweet letter, beautiful layout, and she had no idea he was working on this. He could hardly sleep because he knew the night before he'd be sitting that morning at the breakfast table, and he would nonchalantly keep the sports section and just kind of hand her the lifestyle section, and she'd open it at page 2 and see her name. Well, when he wrote it to his precious wife, Carol, this is unfortunately what she read in the paper. Does your mind ever play tricks on you when you're reading? Now, we know what happened here. For those of you who are at your computer and staring at your keyboard, the C and the V are next to each other. Whoever typeset it at the newspaper office hit the wrong key. Spell check did not highlight it, and that's how it was published. We cannot trust spell check. Granted, we spell check everything. I spell check every email before I press send, but it is not the end all to proofreading. We must do more than that. What else must we do? The T in START stands for tag team. Partner proofreading. One set of eyes looking at something is good, but another set is so much better. And especially if you can give it to someone who has not been as involved in the process as you have, to get them to read it from a fresh frame of mind. Honestly, if you have been working on a project for 3 weeks, you are the worst person to proofread it because you are too familiar with it. You're probably dreaming about it when you go to sleep at night. So give it to someone, a disinterested party, and get them to proofread it for you. The A stands for approach backward. Some of you have heard that you decontextualize a message by not proofreading it in order, but proofreading it up the page line by line backward. That does help pull out mistakes that otherwise our eyes can miss. And the R stands for read it out loud. Ladies and gentlemen, as we get near to the end of our time together, we've covered a lot of information, and we've covered it fairly rapidly. But I want you to hear me when I say, ultimately, our eyes are pitiful editors. It is our ears that are excellent editors. And if we take the time to read what we've written out loud so our ears can hear what it sounds like to our readers, that is how we're going to catch our most awkward wording mistakes. Read it out loud. No one's going to, they may think you talk to yourself already. And seriously, don't sit at your computer and just mouth it or whisper it. Read it out loud. Our ears will pick up on nuances of words that our eyes will miss. In fact, I'm going to show you how this works here at the end of our time together. I have a few sentences that clients have sent me. These are fun, but it proves the point. Here's one that was hanging at the Budapest Zoo. The sign read, "Please do not feed the animals. If you have any suitable food, give it to the guard on duty." So what is that? As technical editors, we look for what a message literally is saying, and that is literally saying, feed the guard. Here's one hanging outside a Norwegian cocktail lounge. Ladies are requested not to have children in the bar. Now, when your ears hear you say have children in a bar, what do we know is a better word? Our ears tell you it should read, ladies are requested not to bring children into the bar. Bring, not have children. Of course, my question is, when you look about wasted words, why not just say no children allowed? That would solve the problem altogether. Here's one hanging outside a Turkish laundry. The reason I put this here is this happens to a lot of people. It's called an error of omission. In this case, they left out a word. They left out the word off. This should read, drop off your trousers here for best results. Here's a copy of that Franklin Covey style guide, and as you're looking at that, and some of you may be checking to see if you can order it now, to summarize, we've really walked through the pre-writing, writing, and rewriting phases of any technical or workplace document. And we've talked about the guidelines for bulleted list, how to be more alert and have a heightened awareness of wasted words, how to explain terms for people and use parentheses to do that. We have covered a lot in a short amount of time. Not everything I've shared with you is brand new information. I know that. And what I would hope is the case here is that what you've heard has been a good refresher. It's reinforced some of what you're already doing well. But I do want you to think about some of the new things you've heard during our time together. Is it a new idea to you to invest 60% of your time in rewriting? Was it new to you to hear some of those guidelines for making our bulleted list consistent and readable? Maybe you've heard you're supposed to read something out loud, but you haven't been doing it, and you will commit to reading it out loud. Now, seriously, I read every email out loud before I press send. And I've caught when I've forgotten to attach a message before by doing just that. It's one thing to know it, everyone. It's another thing to implement it and actually do it. So as we are thinking through what are some of the tried and true truths you've heard today and some of the new ideas that I hope you're excited about, I'm now going to turn our program back over to Vicki to field any questions some of you may have.